For 300 years, the Krovian battle armor remained undefeated. News of its approach made entire planets surrender without a fight. The armor was the pride of the Krovian Empire, a race of tall, blue-skinned aliens with 4 arms and compound eyes that saw in directions humans could only dream about. The armor itself was a marvel of technology. Black as the deepest space with swirls of blue energy running across its surface, it stood 9 feet tall when worn. It multiplied the wearer's strength by 100 times. Its built-in computer brain learned from every battle, predicting enemy moves before they happened. No weapon had ever pierced it, no strategy had ever confused it, and no warrior had ever overcome it. Commander Vazix was the current bearer of the legendary armor. He had used it to claim more than 50 planets for the Krovian Empire. His name alone caused fear across the galaxy. With compound eyes that could track multiple targets and a tactical mind shaped by 2 centuries of warfare, Vazix believed himself to be invincible while wearing the armor. Earth is our next target, Vazix announced to his war council aboard the massive Krovian mothership. Our scouts report they have advanced technology but limited space defenses. They will make a valuable addition to our empire. The mothership, 20 miles long and shaped like a giant arrowhead, moved through space toward the human solar system. Inside, 10,000 Krovian warriors prepared for what they expected would be an easy victory. As was their custom, the Krovians sent diplomatic messengers ahead. Not because they wanted peace, but because they enjoyed watching hope die when planets learned about the unbeatable armor coming their way. The 3 Krovian diplomats arrived at Earth's United Space Command headquarters in Geneva. They stood before the 20-person Earth Defense Council, their blue skin and multiple arms marking them as clearly alien. "We come with a message from the great Krovian Empire," the lead diplomat said. "Your planet has been chosen to join our domain. Surrender now and your people will be treated well. Resist and you will face our champion, Commander Vazix, wearing the Krovian battle armor that has never known defeat in 3 centuries." The room fell silent. Admiral Judy Collins, head of Earth's Defense Forces, leaned forward. Her gray hair was cut short, and the lines on her face showed years of difficult decisions. "We appreciate your warning," she said carefully. "But Earth has never surrendered to anyone. We request time to consider your offer." The Krovians nodded. "You have 7 Earth days. We will return for your answer." After the aliens left, the council erupted in argument. "We can't possibly fight something that's undefeated for 300 years, shouted General William Peters, slamming his fist on the table. "But we can't just surrender either," countered Dr. Alan Russell from the Science Division. "There must be something we can do." In the back of the room sat Lieutenant Frank Miller. At 32 years old, he wasn't important enough to speak at the council meeting. He was only there to present data if asked. Frank had short brown hair, stood 6 feet tall, and had a scar running down his left cheek from a training accident. What made him special wasn't his appearance but his mind. While the council argued, Frank watched the recording of previous battles fought by the Krovian armor. The video showed the armor facing warriors from 17 different alien species. Each time, the armor seemed to learn its opponent's style within minutes, then counter every move perfectly. Frank noticed something no one else had seen. Before the armor adapted, there was always a brief moment, less than a second, when it seemed confused by new attack patterns. 3 days later, Frank was still studying the videos when Admiral Collins found him in the analysis lab. Empty coffee, cups surrounded his computer station. "Miller, you've been watching these videos for 72 hours straight," she said. "What are you looking for?" Frank looked up with red-rimmed eyes. "A weakness, ma'am. And I think I found one." He played a section of video, slowed down to 1/10 speed. "See here? When the Zentari warrior changes his attack style completely, the armor takes 0.87 seconds to adapt. During that time, it's vulnerable. Less than a second? That's not much of an advantage," Admiral Collins said. "It's enough if we keep changing," Frank replied. "The armor works by finding patterns and countering them. But what if the fighter never established a pattern?" Admiral Collins looked skeptical. "You think you can fight without patterns? Every fighter falls into habits." Most do, Frank agreed. But I've been training in multiple fighting styles for years, and more importantly, I understand how the armor thinks. Frank had always been different. While other soldiers practiced perfecting their techniques, he studied diversity. He learned boxing, karate, wrestling, fencing, and even ballet. His instructors thought he was wasting his time. His fellow soldiers called him Crazy Miller. But Frank believed that unpredictability was the ultimate weapon. When the Krovian diplomats returned for Earth's answer, they were surprised by what they heard. Admiral Collins stood before them. "We have a counteroffer. Single combat. Our champion against yours. If we win, you leave our solar system forever." The Krovians looked at each other and laughed. "You wish to face the undefeated armor in single combat? This is amusing. Who would be foolish enough to attempt this?" Frank stepped forward. "I would." The lead diplomat studied Frank with his compound eyes. "You? You are small even for a human. Commander Vazix has defeated warriors twice your size." "Size isn't everything," Frank replied calmly. After communicating, with their mothership, the Krovians agreed. They loved the idea of defeating Earth's champion in front of the watching galaxy. It would make Earth's surrender even more complete. "The combat will take place on your moon in 3 days," the lead diplomat announced. "It will be broadcast across the Galactic Federation so all can witness the power of the Krovian Empire." After they left, Admiral Collins turned to Frank. "I hope you know what you're doing, Miller. The fate of Earth now rests on your shoulders." Frank nodded. "The armor has never faced a human before, Admiral, and it's never faced someone who understands how it thinks." For the next 3 days, Frank prepared like never before. He practiced switching between fighting styles at random. He studied the armor's weak points. He worked with Earth's top engineers to create special tools that might help him exploit the armor's brief moments of confusion. As the day of combat approached, Earth held its breath. Their fate would be decided not by armies or spaceships, but by one man who believed he could do the impossible, defeat the armor that had never lost. The journey to the moon took only 2 hours in Earth's fastest shuttle. Frank sat quietly, his eyes closed, going through fighting moves in his mind. Next to him, Dr. Laura Winters checked his vital signs on a small device. "Your heart rate is very steady for someone about to face an unbeaten alien champion," she said. Frank opened his eyes and smiled slightly. "Being afraid won't help me win." Dr. Winters was Earth's top expert on alien biology. She had short red hair and quick hands that never seemed to stop moving. For the past 3 days, she had taught Frank everything known about Krovian physiology. "Remember, their 4 arms give them advantages in grappling, and those compound eyes can see you even when you think you're not in their field of vision," she reminded him. "But the armor is the real enemy, not the Krovian inside it," Frank replied. "The armor is what I need to beat." The shuttle landed at Armstrong Base, Earth's main lunar facility. A transparent dome covered the combat arena specially built for this encounter. Through the clear ceiling, Earth hung like a blue jewel in the black sky. Representatives from 30 different alien species had come to watch. None of them had ever seen the Krovian armor defeated. Many came out of curiosity, some out of respect, but none believed the human would win. Admiral Collins met Frank at the preparation chamber. "The Krovian mothership has entered lunar orbit. Commander Vazix will arrive soon." Frank nodded as he checked his minimal gear. He wore only a light bodysuit that would protect him from minor impacts, but nothing more. In his belt, he carried 3 small devices created by Earth's best engineers. "Are you sure you don't want more protection?" the Admiral asked, looking concerned. Frank shook his head. "Speed and flexibility are my only advantages. Armor would slow me down." "The whole planet is watching, Miller. No pressure," she added with a grim smile. "Just one more fight," Frank replied. But they both knew it was the most important fight in human history. The Krovian shuttle arrived with a roar of engines. From it emerged Commander Vazix, already wearing the legendary battle armor. The black surface with blue energy lines made him look like a creature from a nightmare. Standing 9 feet tall in the armor, he towered over everyone present. "I am surprised the human has not fled," Vazix's voice boomed through the armor's speakers. You show courage, if not wisdom. The rules of combat were simple. The fight would continue until one side surrendered or could no longer continue. No outside. Weapons were allowed except those carried at the start of the battle. The Krovians had agreed to leave Earth's solar system if they lost, while Earth would surrender if Frank was defeated. As they entered the arena, Frank looked small and fragile next to the massive armored figure. Observers from 30 worlds watched, from seats surrounding the combat floor. The air felt heavy with tension. An alien official from the Galactic Federation stepped forward. This combat will determine the fate of planet Earth. It will begin at the sound of the tone and continue until there is a clear victor. He raised his hand, then dropped it as a deep tone sounded through the arena. Vazix moved first, charging forward with surprising speed for something so large. The armor amplified his already considerable strength. His first punch hit only air as Frank sidestepped with the grace of a dancer. Frank did not try to attack immediately. Instead, he moved constantly, never in a straight line, never repeating the same pattern of steps. He circled, jumped, rolled, and spun in ways that seemed random. Vazix laughed. Running will not save you, human. The armor learns every movement you make. Then I'll just have to keep surprising it, Frank replied. For the first 5 minutes, Frank did nothing but evade. The watching aliens murmured in confusion. This was not how battles were usually fought. Warriors typically engaged directly, testing each other's strength. But Frank was doing something different. Inside the armor, Vazix grew frustrated. The computer systems usually predicted enemy movements within the first minute of combat. But the human moved in ways that defied prediction. When the armor expected him to dodge left based on previous patterns, he would suddenly drop to the floor and roll right. Finally, Frank launched his first attack. Instead of striking at obvious targets like joints or the helmet, he tapped a seemingly random spot on the armor's back. Then he was gone before Vazix could react, dancing away to safety. What game is this? Vazix demanded. Your weak touches do nothing to me. Frank didn't answer. He continued his strange pattern of random movements, occasionally striking at different points on the armor. Each touch seemed meaningless on its own. What observers couldn't see was that Frank was testing the armor's response time. Each tap was aimed at a specific point where sensors connected to the main systems. He was creating a map of how quickly the armor reacted to unexpected contact. 10 minutes into the fight, Vazix had still not landed a solid blow on Frank. The psycho. Armor's predictive systems kept recalibrating, trying to find patterns in the human's chaotic movements. Stand and fight properly, Vazix roared, swinging all 4 arms in wide arcs. Frank rolled under the attack and came up behind the armored figure. This time he struck harder at a connection point near the armor's elbow. He was rewarded with a spark of blue energy and a momentary stutter in the armor's movement. The watching crowd gasped. No one had ever made the legendary armor falter before. Vazix turned, his movements suddenly less fluid. What did you do? He demanded. I found a weak spot, Frank replied simply. The armor systems began running diagnostics, diverting power to repair the damaged connection. This created a brief lag in its response time, exactly what Frank had been hoping for. With new confidence, Frank changed his approach entirely. He switched from evasive dancing to direct martial arts strikes targeting the same connection point repeatedly. The armor, still calibrating to his previous movement style, couldn't adapt quickly enough. Frank landed 3 solid hits before the armor adjusted. Then he immediately switched styles again, becoming fluid and unpredictable once more. In the observation booth, Dr. Winters watched in amazement. He's forcing the armor to constantly recalibrate. It can't keep up with someone who never establishes a pattern. Admiral Collins nodded. That's what Miller meant about understanding how the armor thinks. It's not about outfighting it, it's about outsmarting it. On the combat floor, Frank continued his unpredictable assault. The armor was designed to learn and counter any fighting style, but it couldn't counter what it couldn't predict. And Frank Miller was becoming the most unpredictable opponent the armor had ever faced. As the battle approached the 20-minute mark, something unprecedented happened. The blue energy lines on the armor flickered. For the first time in 300 years, the legendary Krovian battle armor was struggling. The flickering blue lines on the Krovian armor caused a wave of whispers through the watching crowd. No one had ever seen the legendary armor show any sign of weakness before. Frank noticed the change too, but he knew better than to get overconfident. The battle was far from over. Vazix roared in anger, the sound amplified by the armor's speakers. "This is impossible. The armor cannot be failing." Frank kept moving, never pausing long enough to become an easy target. "It's not failing," he called back. "It just wasn't designed to fight a human." Inside the armor, warning indicators flashed across Vazix's vision. The predictive systems were overloading from trying to analyze too many different fighting styles at once. The armor had been programmed to recognize patterns, but Frank refused to give it any consistent pattern to learn from. Vazix decided to change tactics. Instead of trying to hit the quick-moving human directly, he slammed his fist into the floor. The impact sent a shockwave across the arena, momentarily throwing Frank off balance. "Predictable or not, you cannot dodge forever," Vazix growled, following up with a sweeping attack that nearly caught Frank as he regained his footing. Frank rolled away just in time, but not before Vazix's armored hand grazed his shoulder. The glancing blow was enough to spin Frank around and send pain shooting down his arm. If that had been a direct hit, it would have ended the fight. In the observation booth, Admiral Collins leaned forward with concern. "He can't take even one solid hit from that thing." Dr. Winters nodded. "The armor multiplies Krovian strength by 100 times. A direct hit would shatter bones." Frank knew this too. As he recovered from the near miss, he reached to his belt and removed one of the small devices the engineers had made for him. It looked like a simple metal disc, smaller than a coin. The next time Vazix charged, Frank didn't just evade. He flipped over the Krovian's head in a move that seemed more appropriate for a gymnast than a soldier. As he passed overhead, he pressed the disc against the armor's helmet. The disc activated with a soft beep. It began emitting a rapidly changing electromagnetic pulse designed to interfere with the armor's sensors. Vazix swatted at his helmet as the visual display inside began to glitch. "What trickery is this?" he demanded, his movements becoming less coordinated as the armor's input systems struggled. Frank didn't waste the opportunity. He pulled out his second device, a small rod that extended into a staff with a touch of a button. The staff was made of a special alloy developed by Earth scientists, designed to conduct and amplify energy. "No weapons were allowed," Vazix protested, still trying to dislodge the disc from his helmet. "This isn't a weapon," Frank replied. "It's a tool." Using the staff for extra reach, Frank began striking precise points on the armor where he had identified sensor connections. Each hit was carefully aimed at junctions where the armor's systems connected. He moved in a blur, hitting 7 different points in less than 5 seconds. The blue energy lines on the armor flickered more violently now. Parts of the surface that had been smooth black began to show a grid pattern beneath, as if the outer layer was failing. In the stands, the alien observers watched in stunned silence. Many had wagered fortunes on the armor's victory. Some had traveled from distant galaxies just to witness another triumph of Krovian technology. None had expected to see the armor in distress. "The human fights without honor," one Krovian official complained to the Galactic Federation representative. "This is not proper combat." The Federation official, a tall being with translucent skin, shook his head. The rules stated no outside weapons except those carried at the start. The human had these devices from the beginning. The combat is valid. Vazix finally managed to knock the disc from his helmet, but the damage was done. The armor's systems had been temporarily scrambled, forcing a partial restart of the predictive algorithms. During that brief reset, the armor's strength enhancement reduced to only 50 times normal, still incredibly powerful, but only half of its full capability. Frank noticed the change immediately. The armor's movements were slightly slower, its reactions a fraction less precise. It was still dangerous, but now Frank had a fighting chance. "Your tricks have only delayed the inevitable," Vazix said, advancing again. "The armor cannot be defeated. It will adapt and overcome as it always has." "That's what you don't understand," Frank replied, circling cautiously. "Adaptation requires stability. I'm not giving it anything stable to adapt to. Frank continued his erratic fighting style, mixing techniques from a dozen different combat forms. One moment he moved like a boxer, the next like a wrestler, then switched to moves borrowed from ballet and gymnastics. He never repeated the same sequence twice. 25 minutes into the battle, both combatants showed signs of fatigue. Frank's breathing was heavy, and sweat soaked his bodysuit. Inside the armor, Vazix was also tiring, the mental strain of trying to control the increasingly unresponsive armor taking its toll. Frank knew he needed to end this soon. He didn't have the endurance to continue much longer. It was time for his final gambit. He pulled out his third and last device, a small cube that fit in the palm of his hand. This was the most experimental of all the tools Earth's engineers had created, based on theories about how the armor's energy system worked. Frank waited for Vazix to commit to another charge, then dropped to the floor at the last possible moment. As the armored figure passed over him, Frank reached up and pressed the cube against the center of the armor's back, directly over where the main power distribution node was believed to be. The cube activated, generating a specific frequency designed to create a resonance cascade in the armor's energy system. If the engineer's theories were correct, it would temporarily disrupt the armor's power distribution. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then the blue energy lines across the armor froze completely. A moment later, they flared with sudden brightness, pulsing erratically. The armor jerked to a stop, locked in place like a statue. "What have you done?" Vazix's voice came from inside the armor, but the amplification system had failed, making it sound muffled and distant. "Created a feedback loop in your power system," Frank explained, backing away cautiously. "It won't last long, but it should prove my point." For the first time in 300 years, the legendary Krovian battle armor stood completely immobilized. It hadn't been destroyed or defeated through brute force. It had been outsmarted by a human who understood its fundamental weakness. The effect lasted only 15 seconds before the armor's backup systems engaged. The blue energy lines stabilized, and movement returned. But something had changed. The perfect synchronization between Vazix and the armor was gone. There was a noticeable lag between his commands and the armor's response. Frank stood ready, his last gambit played. He was exhausted, injured, and out of special devices. If this hadn't been enough, he had nothing left to try. Vazix took one step forward, then stopped. The armor moved awkwardly, like a puppet with tangled strings. The harmony between wearer and technology that made the armor legendary had been broken. For several long moments, everyone in the arena held their breath. The legendary Krovian battle armor stood awkwardly in the center of the combat floor. Its movements were jerky and uncoordinated, like a dancer who had forgotten the steps. Frank remained in a defensive stance, watching carefully. Though exhausted, he forced himself to stay alert. This was the most dangerous moment. A wounded opponent often fought with desperate fury. "The armor has never been damaged like this," Vazix said, his voice now coming through the speakers with static. "What have you done to it?" "I disrupted the neural link between you and the armor," Frank explained, still circling cautiously. "The armor can't predict what I'll do next if it can't even predict what you want it to do." In the observation booth, Dr. Winters leaned forward excitedly. He found the key. The armor works by forming a perfect connection with its wearer's thoughts. By creating that feedback loop, he broke the connection. Admiral Collins nodded, but her expression remained tense. "The fight isn't over yet. Vazix is still dangerous even with damaged armor." On the combat floor, Vazix attempted to charge again. The armor moved forward, but with a noticeable delay. Where before it had flowed like water, now it seemed mechanical and stiff. Frank easily sidestepped the attack. "Surrender," Frank suggested. "The armor is damaged. There's no shame in acknowledging that." Vazix laughed, a harsh sound through the armor's damaged speakers. "Surrender. The Krovian Empire does not surrender. The armor has never been defeated." "There's a first time for everything," Frank replied. Vazix roared and launched a series of attacks. Though the armor's movements were compromised, its strength remained formidable. Frank dodged most blows, but one caught him on the side, sending him tumbling across the floor. Frank rose slowly, wincing with pain. His ribs were likely bruised, maybe cracked. He could still move, but each breath brought sharp pain. The watching crowd murmured. Many had begun to believe the human might actually win, but now it seemed the armor would triumph after all, despite its damage. Frank knew he had to end this quickly. He no longer had the strength or speed to keep evading. It was time for his final strategy, the one he had kept secret from everyone, even Admiral Collins. He stopped moving and stood perfectly still in the center of the arena. Vazix paused, suspicious of this sudden change. "Have you given up, human?" "No," Frank said calmly. "I'm just changing my approach." Instead of his previous unpredictable movements, Frank now stood in a classic martial arts stance. His feet were planted firmly, his hands held in a traditional guard position. It was the most basic, predictable fighting stance possible. In the observation booth, Admiral Collins stood up in alarm. "What is he doing? The armor will adapt immediately to such a standard position." Dr. Winters looked equally concerned. "He's giving the armor exactly what it wants, a pattern it can analyze and counter." On the combat floor, Vazix seemed confused by Frank's change in strategy. Then he laughed. "Finally, you fight properly. Now the armor will show its true power." The armor systems began rapidly analyzing Frank's stance. The predictive algorithms that had been confused by his chaotic movements now had something clear to work with. Within seconds, the armor had calculated the most effective counters to Frank's position. Vazix moved forward confidently, the armor guiding his movements to exploit the weaknesses in Frank's traditional stance. He aimed a strike directly at Frank's exposed midsection, a textbook counter to the human's position. At the last possible moment, Frank smiled. Instead of attempting to block or evade, Frank stepped directly into the attack. He moved forward and to the side at a precise angle, one that no traditional fighting style would ever teach. It was a movement he had created himself, specifically for this moment. The armor, programmed to counter known fighting techniques, had no response for this completely unorthodox move. Vazix's attack missed by inches as Frank slipped past his guard. Now inside the armor's reach, Frank placed both hands on the chest plate, directly over the central power core. He pressed his palms flat against the black surface and closed his eyes. For a brief moment, nothing happened. Then Frank's hands began to glow with a soft blue light, the same color as the energy lines on the armor. Vazix froze, unable to move. What is this? The armor isn't responding. What no one knew, not even Admiral Collins, was that Frank had undergone an experimental procedure before the battle. Earth scientists had implanted tiny bioelectric amplifiers in his palms, devices that could generate a specific electromagnetic frequency when activated by his nervous system. The frequency exactly matched the armor's control systems, creating a conflicting signal that overrode Vazix's commands. The armor doesn't just learn from its opponents, Frank explained, his voice strained with effort. It learns from its wearer too. And right now it's getting very confused about who's wearing it. The blue energy lines on the armor began to flow toward Frank's hands, as if drawn by a magnet. For several seconds, human and armor were connected in a circuit of glowing blue energy. Then, with a final surge of will, Frank sent a command through the connection. Shut down. The armor went dark. All the blue energy lines faded to black. The systems that had made it invincible for 3 centuries went silent. Inside the now powerless shell, Vazix struggled to move, but the armor had become nothing more than dead weight. Without its power, systems, the 9-foot exoskeleton was simply too heavy to manipulate. Frank stepped back, nearly collapsing from exhaustion. The implants in his hands had used his own body's electricity, draining him of his remaining strength. The arena fell, completely silent. Representatives from 30 alien species stared in disbelief. The undefeated Krovian battle armor stood frozen and lifeless in the center of the combat floor. After 300 years and victories against 17 different species, the legendary armor had finally met its match, not in superior technology or strength, but in human creativity and unpredictability. The Galactic Federation official stepped forward, his voice solemn. Commander Vazix, can you continue the combat? From inside the armor came Vazix's voice, no longer amplified by speakers, but muffled and small. The armor is inoperative, I cannot move. The official nodded and turned to Frank. Lieutenant Frank Miller of Earth, you have achieved victory. The combat is concluded. A moment of stunned silence hung in the air. Then the arena erupted in sound as aliens from across the galaxy reacted to the unprecedented outcome. Some cheered, some protested, but all recognized they had witnessed a historic moment. Admiral Collins and Dr. Winters rushed to Frank's side as he sank to his knees in exhaustion. You did it, Miller, Admiral Collins said, her voice thick with emotion. You actually did it. Frank managed a tired smile. Humans are good at doing the impossible, Admiral. It's kind of our specialty. It took 6 Krovian engineers to remove their commander from the powerless armor. The once mighty Vazix looked small and vulnerable without his technological shell. His blue skin seemed pale, and his compound eyes darted nervously around the room. Frank watched from a medical bed where Dr. Winters was treating his injuries. He had 3 cracked ribs, a dislocated shoulder, and extreme exhaustion from the bioelectric implants draining his system. But he was alive, and more importantly, he had won. The implants were a crazy risk. Dr. Winters scolded as she rapped. His ribs. You could have suffered permanent nerve damage or heart failure. Frank winced as she tightened the bandage. It was our best chance, and it worked. Admiral Collins entered the medical bay, her face serious but her eyes showing pride. The Krovians are honoring the agreement. Their fleet is leaving our solar system. Earth is safe thanks to you. Frank tried to sit up but fell back with a groan. Good. It was worth it then. A Galactic Federation official followed the Admiral into the room. The tall alien with translucent skin bowed slightly toward Frank. Lieutenant Miller, the Federation Council requests your presence at an emergency meeting. Your victory has complicated galactic politics. Frank raised an eyebrow. Complicated how? The official shifted uncomfortably. The Krovian Empire has expanded for 3 centuries based on the fear of their battle armor. Now that you have defeated it, 17 subjugated species are considering rebellion. The galaxy stands on the brink of chaos. 2 days later, Frank found himself in the Grand Chamber of the Galactic Federation Council. Located on a space station at the edge of the solar system, the massive room held representatives from over 100 alien species. Frank sat at a special table with Admiral Collins and Earth's ambassador. Across the chamber sat Commander Vazix and the Krovian delegation. Their once proud posture was now stiff with anger and humiliation. The legendary armor stood on display behind them, lifeless and dark. The Federation President, a being with silvery skin and 4 eyes, called the session to order. We face an unprecedented situation. For 3 centuries, the Krovian Empire has expanded through the power of their battle armor. Now that power has been broken by Lieutenant Frank Miller of Earth. Murmurs ran through the chamber. Many species had suffered under Krovian rule. Some looked at Frank with gratitude, others with concern about what would come next. The Krovians demand Earth turn over the technology used to defeat the armor. The president continued. They claim it violates the spirit of the combat agreement. Vazix stood up. His voice was harsh without the armor's speakers. The human used trickery and hidden implants. This was not honorable combat. Frank remained seated but spoke clearly. The rules stated I could use any equipment I carried at the start of the battle. The implants were in my body. I broke no rules. The Federation legal expert confirmed Frank's interpretation. The Krovians had no claim under the combat agreement. Admiral Collins then rose to speak. Earth has no interest in conquest or retribution. We fought only to protect our planet. We propose a new arrangement that will bring stability to the galaxy. She outlined Earth's proposal. The Krovian Empire would transition to a confederation, with member planets given autonomy. Earth would share defensive technology with formerly subjugated worlds. In exchange, Earth would gain membership in the Galactic Federation and access to interstellar travel technology. The debate lasted hours. Many species supported Earth's proposal, seeing it as a chance for freedom. The Krovians resisted at first, but eventually recognized they had little choice. Their power had been built on fear of the armor, and that fear was gone. Finally, a historic agreement was reached. The Krovian Empire would end its conquests and begin the process of liberation for its subjugated worlds. Earth would join the Galactic Federation as a full member, bringing its unique perspective to galactic politics. As the council adjourned, Vazix approached Frank. Without the armor, the Krovian was still 7 feet tall, but no longer seemed like an unstoppable force. "You have destroyed 3 centuries of Krovian dominance," Vazix said, his compound eyes fixed on Frank. Frank shook his head. "I just showed that technology isn't everything. The armor's weakness was thinking it could predict and counter anything. Humans succeed because we do the unexpected." Vazix was silent for a moment. "The armor will be repaired. It will be made stronger, with new systems to counter your techniques. And next time, humans will find a different way to beat it," Frank replied calmly. "That's what we do. We adapt, not by following patterns, but by breaking them." Something like respect showed in Vazix's alien eyes. He gave a formal Krovian salute, then walked away without another word. 1 month later, Frank stood on the observation deck of Earth's first interstellar ship, the Hope. His ribs had healed, and the bioelectric implants had been removed once. Their effects were understood. Now he was preparing for humanity's first official mission to the stars. Admiral Collins joined him at the window. Outside, the shipyard buzzed with activity as alien engineers worked alongside humans, sharing technology. As part of the new alliance, "The President wants to promote you to captain," she said. "You'll command our first deep space exploration vessel." Frank smiled as he watched the stars. "I never wanted to be famous. I just saw a problem that needed solving." "That's exactly why you're the right person for this job," Collins replied. "Humans are joining a galaxy that's very different from what we imagined. We need people who can think differently." Frank nodded. The defeat of the armor had changed everything. Earth was no longer alone in the universe. Humans would bring their unique perspective to the stars, their creativity, their unpredictability, their ability to look at problems in new ways. The Krovians thought their armor made them invincible because it could learn and adapt to any pattern, Frank said. But humans have a skill that might be even more valuable in this galaxy. "What's that?" Collins asked. Frank smiled as the ship's engines began their startup sequence. "We know when to break the pattern." As the Hope prepared for its maiden voyage, news of the human who defeated the unbeatable armor spread throughout the galaxy. The story grew with each telling, how a single human had overcome 3 centuries of Krovian dominance not through superior technology or strength, but through creativity and unpredictability. It was a new era for humanity and for the galaxy, and it had begun because one human dared to challenge the armor that had defeated every alien, until a human took it on.